Welcome to HB Tuner's Ford Gen 1 Coyote Training Part 20. In this training module, we're going to take a look at dialing in our low and high slope injector-based tuning within our Ford PCM programming. Now, the low-high slope tuning is something that you may need to jump into if you've changed out to aftermarket injectors and you're finding that your MAF curve is dialed 100%, but you're finding that you have fuel deviations. So you might have at idle, your fuel trims being off, or even at full throttle, you might find your fuel trims are gonna be off. We can use our low-high slope tuning technique that we're gonna outline in the tutorial to dial things in so we don't disturb our MAF curve and absorb bad injector data into our MAF curve, which can throw everything off. Let's jump in here so we can check out how to work with doing our low and high slope injector tuning.
Okay, so let's get started. We're going to be taking a look at how we can tune out bad injector data using our low and high slope programming within our Ford PCMs. In our last tutorial, we talked about looking at dialing in our MAF curve, having bad data, and what that can do and what that looks like. So we learned how to spot trends and compare your calibrated MAF curve and your calibrated MAF readings to a stock equivalent log file for our mass airflow, and seeing how far things are off by. That'll give us a good indication on a stock engine that's just bolt-on mods. Even with a supercharger, we should see very similar amounts of airflow being ingested at idle and in part throttle cruise conditions. As long as what we're seeing in our MAF registration readings in our logs are going to match what we would expect stock on a stock equivalent engine, then we'll find that we've dialed in the MAF curve, at least for idle and part throttle correctly. We did some sanity checks, learned how to use our chart versus time in our histogram, plotting our horsepower and torque levels of our engine to figure out if our airflow registration is proper. These horsepower and torque readings were based around looking at the airflow, what it was registering, what it was reading. If we have the airflow obviously gone and calibrated too high or too low, that amount of horsepower and torque at full throttle will be off, and we can get an idea of the trend of what's going on. So we've learned how to spot the trends in our MAF curve and making sure that that data seems logical. And then we also learned what happens if we have bad injector data. I purposely went in the last tutorial and I've altered my injector slopes. This would be the equivalent if you inadvertently entered in bad injector data from injector manufacturer's data sheet or data that you've gotten somewhere. You put it in your calibration file, and let's say that data was wrong in the low or the high slope, or even in the latency or the offset values down here. That will skew up what the amount of error is going to be in our fuel and airflow model. So whether we skew it on the airflow modeling side or on the fuel modeling side, we needed to know which one is which. We know how to spot which side of the equation is incorrect. And then obviously now we're going to be focusing just on fixing the injector data, because we've determined, based on what I've went in the last video, I altered the low and high slopes. So we know the injector data is incorrect. We know the MAF curve was right. We know we validated that. That was good. But we saw in our histogram, taking a look at that last log file, we're seeing here in our overlay, in our MAF tuning, our fuel trims are reporting the error that we're seeing from our fuel and airflow model. So just to quickly go over this, fuel mass is equal to air mass divided by target air fuel. We're reporting and registering the air mass from our mass airflow sensor here. We can see that's grams per second. We specify what we want the target lambda to be at. That's going to be the equivalent ratio commanded in terms of lambda. We specify what we want what the STOICH ratio of the fuel type we're dealing with is going to be, which if we know the STOICH and we know the lambda target, we can figure out a target air fuel from that. So we know air mass, we know the target air fuel. By taking air mass divided by the target air fuel, we'll get a fuel mass. The fuel mass will then be converted into an injector pulse width based on knowing the low and high slope of the injector data, knowing the offset or the latency of the response time of the injector. And then we'll find that it converts that to a pulse width. If we have everything scaled properly, it's going to squirt the fuel out of the injector, it's going to be delivered into the engine, and then when we're measuring the subsequent combustion that happens, the primary oxygen sensors, which are wideband, will pick up an actual wideband lambda measurement. It'll compare it against the target, and if everything's right, you'll hit the target dead on. Now, we're always going to have deviations, and the fuel trim is there to be able to clean up small fluctuations, a couple percent, but we don't want to find large deviations. If we introduce bad injector data, then we've introduced a problem in our fuel modeling side. So we're going to learn how to correct that in this tutorial. A lot of times with aftermarket injectors, the data isn't going to be correct. And instead of touching our MAF curve, which needs to be accurate for many, many reasons, as I talked about in the last tutorial, we don't want to touch that. We want to leave that alone. We want to make that as accurate, or leave it as accurate as possible. we want to go after the injector data to fix the modeling problem, the actual airflow or fuel modeling problem. In this case, it wouldn't be airflow. If we know that that's valid, it would be the fuel modeling problem. So we need to go after that. We need to fix it. And this is going to be how we do it using low and high slope injector tuning. So let's talk about...
Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here. And you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.